Thank you, V. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Trophy Horses episode 577. I'm your host this week, Alex, and before we get started, I want to give a big shout out to Veronica. She is awesome. She not only has been great on the show when she's guest hosting, but also she is the one running our stream over on Twitch. So I want to give a big shout out to Veronica. Well, I don't think you'll be happy to know, but I didn't want to follow up with you because it seems like the tornado, the storm that was coming after you, and even the one that came after Nitro last week while we were playing Rocket League, apparently it's coming after me because we've had Noah's Ark biblical level warnings in the past 2 hours. First it was a tornado, then it was a severe thunderstorm, and now it's a flash flood too. So apparently it's taken a while to get here, but whatever was coming after you is now on our ass too.
We're under a watch, but everything died out. So I guess it got you instead.
Well, it gets weird because this is Kentucky, and if you don't live in Kentucky, you don't know how schizophrenic our weather can be. Sunny one moment, and then later in the day, snowy or torrential downpour. It's just nuts. And one side of this, it's like yin and yang over here. One side of the street's very sunny, and then you look off into the distance on the horizon, and it's like the sky is pitch black because you see the storms looming. So I told Matt and Veronica this. Heads up, if for some reason we have to abruptly stop this stream or this show, it's because I had to seek shelter for the storms. So yeah, but We think most of it's heading south now, south of where I am. So I should be good, but just a heads up in case things, I get carried off to Oz. You all know what's happened. And I've said his name numerous times now, but haven't actually introduced him fully. He hasn't been able to talk. The Professor of Zelda, it's Matt Grinelli.
Thanks. And it's, I'll mirror your excitement because I can be on the show when Tricky isn't here to feed you all with the lies that Tears of the Kingdom is not a Zelda game. I'm here to certify that it is indeed a Zelda game. And
I want the listeners to know that we've had that argument so many times now that whenever Tricky mentions it or gets on a tangent, whenever I'm editor, I cut that shit out of the show. Because it's like the whole Microsoft Activision discussion. I just don't want to hear it. Of course, Matt's welcome to throw salt in the wound. That's perfectly fine. We'll take that. But yeah, Tricky's bullshit. We've heard it 1,000 times before. But we're here. We got Yield. We got Matt. We're gonna have a good time. So before we get into the show proper, how you all been doing this week? Matt, it's been a little bit longer for you. How's life been going for you and V since the last time you guys were on the show?
Not bad. I've actually started a brand new job, and now I'm working from home for the most part, going into the office a couple days a week. So my mental sanity has taken a positive turn ever since. That was mid-May. But V and I are living the life, enjoying our times together. We just recently picked her up Final Fantasy 16, so we're trying to get her into that and see what that turns into. And otherwise, it's not been too bad, all things considered.
So I've only seen one review for Final Fantasy 16, and that's GameSpot. GameSpot has been notoriously hard on stuff recently. Well, at least some of the movies I've seen them review, like The Flash, Transformers. But I did see they gave Final Fantasy a 9. How is it so far?
I've only seen her play about 2, maybe 3 hours of it. It's hard to judge off of that amount of time. So if Tricky were to take hints, he shouldn't be judging a game that, he's only spent about 3 hours in.
Heck, you're probably not even out of the tutorial yet.
No, and based off of what I've seen V do, it's Final Fantasy games have a heavy action, especially these later ones. So she's still got a good ways to go to really get into the meat of the game, and I'm kind of excited. I like sitting back watching her play.
Now, is that what we know that she has her scheduled days or her stream days scheduled out. Is she playing Final Fantasy 16 on a particular day of the week?
I don't believe so yet, because since that we bought it on the PS5, and therefore she doesn't stream as much from the PS5 compared to like the PC. So I'm not entirely sure what she's going to do with that one.
Gotcha. Okay, and Veronica's in the chat, or she's silenced, but she's in the chat. She said that she hasn't gotten it set up on the PS5 yet, so that's going to be a hot game. So hopefully, at some point you guys can get that set up, and people can watch a pro play some Final Fantasy 16 on stream. Just real quick, since Veronica is so helpful, what is her stream again? Just so people can go check it out if they want to.
So she's on Twitch under Gamer Veranza, GamerVeranza. She does streaming most nights, late night on the East Coast, and she just threw it into the Twitch chat for everybody. So go ahead and give some follows.
Absolutely, most excellent. All right, and Yield, your week has been good, sir. How's it been?
It hasn't been bad. I'm a week from shutdown, so that's even better. But just been kind of chipping away at some games, and that's kind of been about it.
Oh yeah, and of course what we do here is we play games, we earn trophies. Well, a couple of us, Matt and Veronica, not necessarily on the trophy train, which there are some times I can respect. I can respect that all the time, but certainly more times when trophies are trickier than usual, I can respect it more than ever. Let's go ahead and get into our updated trophy count, which, Yield, I'm assuming that you have updated since you did the agenda.
Yes.
All right.
Everybody but Matt's, because I don't know his.
And Matt, sir, would you mind looking up your trophy count for us, sir, in the meantime?
I got it locked down.
Awesome. So we'll start with Tricky, who couldn't bother to show up to read his own damn trophies. Level 874, total trophy count of 28,125, and a platinum count of 771. I am level 480 with a total trophy count of 8,815 and a platinum count of 146 and 145 games. Yield, sir?
I am a newly minted level 500 with a trophy count of 9683 and a nice shiny new platinum at 175.
Sid is sitting at level 832 with a total trophy count of 23,156 with 718 platinums. Matt, sir, your trophies are?
Level 218, total count of 1266. I think I had gotten a couple from the Horizon Forbidden West DLC since I was last on.
Yes, most likely. Even if you're not, going out of your way to find them or get them, you'll most likely get at least a couple from the progression ones for doing all the main quests and stuff. So, all right. Well, Yield, you talked about a brand new platinum trophy, sir. Why don't you go ahead and rip off? What have you been playing?
So I have been playing some Deep Rock Galactic. I finished out my weapon tree, my cosmetic tree, the day before the season switched over, which was, I think, this past Wednesday or Thursday, the season flipped. So I haven't been able to try out the new season yet. Hope to next week. Played some Zombie Army Trilogy with Nitro. We did some Rocket League with Alex and Nitro. I played some Power Washing Simulator. I've done some World of Warship Legends, working just through my Bureau projects. Played some Borderlands 3. And that game's just not jiving with me.
And we know you're a fan of Tales from the Borderlands, but you were a fan of the first two Borderlands games, correct?
Yep, and I even enjoyed the pre-sequel, but for some reason Borderlands 3 it hasn't clicked yet. I don't know.
Really
I don't
doesn't.
I don't know if that's kind of what my brother said. I was texting him and I'm like, I was kind of getting into it, and then once we left Pandora, I was just kind of like, yeah, it's not clicking. It's not kind of like, okay, yeah, let's play some Borderlands, we'll have some fun. I'm just kind of like, why did I start this? But I've started it, so I'm going to get through it. And then I've been playing some American Fugitive. That's my latest platinum. I finished the story, I believe, after we got done recording last week. And then the rest of this week has just been kind of punch list, working towards the collectibles, and I finished that up this afternoon.
Excellent. And well, Matt, since you're the guest and probably have the most to say about the game you've been playing, I'll just go ahead and go because my weeks have been very light here, and so light that I've pretty much let Daryl catch up to me in the. I shouldn't say let him catch up to me. He's clawed his way up the rankings in the trophy rarity event, so it's all on him. But I have gotten a little complacent, just getting 100% in games, mopping up some trophies, getting some DLC done, and I got to say the medium is not a great game for some competition like this when it comes to rarity of trophies, but I'll talk a little bit more about that game since I've had more time in it. But as Yield said, played some Rocket League. I actually, thanks to Yield, I got 100% in a game that I've been sitting on 80% for 9.5 years now. It's Awesome Knots, and I'm sure that some of you, depending on how long you've listened, have heard me bring that game up in the past, asking for Tricky for help, asking anyone who, if they had the game.
And we got it knocked out in what? A couple hours?
It took us a couple hours. It was annoying because the last two trophies that I needed shouldn't have taken that long, but then I had completely deleted my profile off my console because, Ashley and the kids were using it, so I didn't want them to earn me any trophies by accidentally going on my profile, so I had to reload my profile. And if anyone's ever, tried to sign in or play on the PlayStation 3 these days, there's so many security loopholes that, yes, are appreciated, but are really annoying if you just want to get on and earn some trophies to mop up some things. So it took me a while to go through everything and download the latest firmware and everything. But we got it done. We got Yield a bunch of all the online trophies that he would need. And now it's just grinding as far as, him getting 100% in Awesome Knots. But yeah, I was able to get 100% in another PS3 game going back in 2023 and playing on my old PS3. It feels good to get 100% in those. So I definitely do have to thank Yield for that. And he's obviously been recognized. I can't remember who said it, but somebody in one of the threads said that Yield's an all-star when it comes to, helping people grind out trophies. Because we know he's helped Homer. We know he's helped Riley. We know he's helped Nitro, been a big help to Nitro. Yield, I'm sure there's more people that you've helped get, platinum trophies 100%. But Yield's definitely really good about that. And the community definitely appreciates that.
I mean, I kind of pay it forward. I've had people help me out through, PlayStationTrophies.org or PSN profiles. So it's just, if I've got the game, we'll work it out.
Yep, and very patient because it took me long. I was sitting there at one point for a third controller trying to charge my Vita, but of course, Awesome Knots is not compatible with remote play, so I luckily was able to, a third-party, PS4 controller. I guess I said that in air quotes, but it's got the touchpad on it. So yes, I guess it's a PS4 controller. I was able to hook that up into my PS3, and it worked. So we were able to get me all the trophies, Yield most of his trophies, so looking pretty good there. And of course, the medium. I've been playing more of the medium. It's been a bit of a slog for this game, and I don't mean that in any negative towards the game itself. I don't want Levi to be upset with me. But basically, this game, as far as a trophy hunter goes, this game has 5 sets of collectibles, and there's not a ton of them, but it's one of those games that you have to get all of them in one run. So there's no chapter select. So if you miss one on one run, you got to go back through and play and get all of the collectibles again. So I basically, for the sake of time, save myself time, been going through the game with a trophy guide the first way through. And honestly, I hate that. I just want to play the game and enjoy it the first time through and not have to worry about trophies or getting 100%. But do I want to sit here and play this game 2 times in a row for the sake of the trophies? I mean, honestly, not really. So I kind of wish more developers, in this case, Bloober Team, would, see that and be like, okay, play through your first time and just enjoy it, and then go back the second time through chapter select and mop up whatever. That's, that's kind of what I think has become to be expected from the community these days, especially since trophies and achievements are a big selling point for games. So I wish I didn't have to sit here with a guide and just play through the game the entire way through, the first time through, because I'm paranoid about it. It's oh my God, I don't want to miss a collectible. So I'm constantly checking, rolling through the trophy guide and looking to see where the next collectible is. And I've honestly probably spent just as much time in the trophy guide as I have playing the game, which again is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. As far as the game goes, not considering trophies at all, it's a good game. I see why Levi likes it so much. It is a survival horror game. Like I said before, they do some really cool stuff where they kind of split you, sometimes do split screen, between the material world, which your character lives in, and then the spirit world, which, her spirit version is in, and it helps you kind of solve puzzles and unlock things, progress so that the character in the material world can progress forward. So that's all set up really cool, and a really cool aesthetic the way they do it. And split screen is something a lot of us who've been playing games are used to, so it's not jarring or anything to cut to that. They also have something cool in there called out-of-body experiences, where your character essentially, basically you gain access to different areas of the spirit world which are blocked off in the material world, but you have to leave your body behind. And you only have a limited amount of time in an out-of-body experience. So if you take away too much time, you'll die. And it shows that visually by your character, the spirit version of your character, flakes of her will flake off and leave her body as you're in an out-of-body experience. So you do have a visual sense. It's not like the whole Sonic thing of the music ramps up when you're drowning or when you're low and running low on time. It's visually they have a sign that you're losing time and you need to hurry up to solve the puzzle. So, yeah, it's a cool game. So far, the story is very creepy. The setting, the atmosphere is pitch perfect as far as a survival horror game. You're very isolated. It's very creepy. You cannot defend yourself with weapons. I'm not going to tell you exactly, some of the more dangerous aspects of, your time at the resort, the rundown resort that you're in, but you kind of essentially have to run and hide. You cannot fight. It's not like Dead Space or Resident Evil's where you have a gun to fight with or some kind of machinery. It's just you and a flashlight. So there is a special feeling to a game, a survival horror game like this, where you really struggle to defend yourself, which makes it, to me, a little bit more survival horror than some of those other games, because you truly can't, fight off baddies, I'll say, with weaponry. So I am enjoying the game. The trophy aspect of it, like I said, in the middle of the heat of a competition like we're in, it's not great. But overall, I'm glad I'm playing the game because, like I said, I can see why Levi likes it, because it is a good survival horror game. So with my spiel done, Matt, sir, You maybe not getting trophies, but I know you've been playing a lot of games.
Yes, and before that, I want to say I'm glad somebody's having fun with the medium because I tried it and I grew bored of it very quickly. It just seemed repetitive to me, but at least you're finding some value in playing, especially with wanting to get some of the trophies. I can see that drives you forward. And Yield, Borderlands 3, the problem is 2 was so great. I think it had such high standards to live up to, just nothing they could have done. And for me, the characters being the main draw of the game, I don't think they did as well with the characters on Borderlands 3 as 2. So let me know when you finish.
I agree with that. I liked 1 better than 2, but what made 2 great was Jack. Jack was just an absolutely fantastic villain. But with 3, I remember they made this big deal about the bajillion guns combinations. And I thought, oh, wow, this will be really awesome. So far, the vast majority of the guns I'm running into, I'm like, sell.
Yep.
You know, and it doesn't feel, they don't overly feel different like they did in the other games. And I don't know why. I don't know if that's just because I'm used to Borderlands, but I don't really get that feel of, oh yeah, this is a Malwin gun. Oh yeah, this is a Jacobs. It's like, okay, this is just another gun.
Yeah, and even in the follow-up Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, it just feels like I'm selling more than using. And there's points where I'm getting legendary guns in the latest games, and 5 minutes later I get a blue rare that's even better. I go, well, then what's the point of the legendaries? So yeah, I've been playing a couple different things. First and foremost, on channel3.gg, there was a game night last night, and they played a game called Marbles on Stream. And if you've never played this, it's a Twitch-based game. It's meant to be played streaming, and what everybody does is in chat, they do exclamation play and it adds you as a marble to the race. And essentially it's just a giant like slide or racetrack, and it's physics based. So all the marbles go and whatever happens. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. It was just a fun little community event that was played. And I highly suggest if you ever see anybody playing it, just jump into a stream. It's fun. The recent release of the Transformers movie, which I saw, Rise of the Beasts, was a lot of fun, and that got me back on my Transformers kick. So I started going to see how I could possibly play and replay Transformers Fall of Cybertron. And the problem is, the good thing is I actually still have the disc for PS3, but I rarely boot up my PS3. So I was looking to see how I could play it on PC. And while Steam did have it at one point, it's now delisted. Luckily, there's still some distributors out there, including Amazon, who sells keys. So I took a risk. I purchased the key on Amazon and activated it. And I've been playing Fall of Cybertron on my Steam Deck. And man, they don't make games like that anymore, at least not Transformers games. And I really want them to get back to be able to make Transformers games like that. And then finally, and most predominantly, my time has been taken up since the middle of May playing Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And I have close to 90 hours in the game, I think. And I'm only maybe 60% done with the story. And I'm nowhere near all of the shrines and exploring the underworld or all the sky islands. They did a massive, massive job on improving everything Breath of the Wild did and went the extra mile. Still got glitches. It's still got, some frame drops. And albeit it's not a perfect game, but for me, it's easily game of the year so far. And I remember a couple episodes ago that I was on, Alex, you and I talked about what I wanted in the game. And I said, I can't see them not doing some sort of flying mechanic. And with what they did in this game, people are making not just flying machines, but mechs and other types of destroyer robots to fight their battles for him. It's really exciting seeing what people are coming up with.
And to be fair, like with this game and kind of the building mechanic they've added, it may be the first time that people just screw around in a Zelda game, much like they would in a GTA game. Like you're not even trying to finish or go to the next dungeon, you're just messing around to see what you can build.
And that's what was great about it, because in Breath of the Wild, you saw people making things that they shouldn't have been able to make. And that's using the in-game world items and things that the developers had no intention of them making. And here they developed a system, and part of the reason for the long development cycle was because the way with all the devices you could do and all the fusing and melding that's capable, they really just made a tool set, because they didn't go in there going, I think people are going to make this with this, or people can make that with that item. They just said, here's your tools, here's your items, go crazy. We don't know what you're going to come up with, but we feel like it's going to be fun. And like I said, I've seen people do like 12 laser monster thing that would just go and decimate all the strongest enemies in the game. I've seen people make machines that fly all the way across the map. And I've also seen people make, so in the game, much like Breath of the Wild, there's these things called Koroks, and you have to help them. You either find them, or in this game, you help them get to their friends, which usually means you take some sort of device or item and make a carrying case to bring them to their friend, which rewards you with Korok seeds. Well, I've seen people using the fusing system, and they'll fuse like 9 or 10 of them together, and Koroks can't be hurt. You can't kill them. So you fuse 9 or 10 of them together to make like a tank that you move around in, and you can't be killed. It's hilarious seeing what they do. So I'm really excited for playing through the rest of the game, especially since I need to get to it before Spider-Man 2 comes out. And it's like I said, 90 hours in, I'm just getting started.
And it's funny you mentioned Spider-Man 2, because you still got plenty of time before that comes out, but people are already positioning like the battle for Game of the Year. They're like, it's Zelda versus Spider-Man 2 versus Starfield. And I commented on one of those threads. I'm like, hasn't Zelda already won it? Look, I don't care how good Spider-Man 2 is. I don't care how good Starfield is. Zelda, because we've grown up with it, so many people that have cash money now to spend on video games, it's going to be hard to topple that, because one, Tears of the Kingdom. I'm one of the many people that just continues to say Breath of the Wild. Tears of the Kingdom is really, really good. And then you've got like just the nostalgia for Zelda and the love for Zelda. Can any other game beat Zelda this year? Because Zelda almost always wins. When it doesn't, well, maybe not Twilight Princess, maybe not Skyward Sword, but it won Game of the Year as Breath of the Wild, and I have to imagine this is easily the front runner far ahead.
Oh, I mean, there's a reason why we only get Zelda once every 5 to 7 years, and when they do follow-ups, like if you think back to Ocarina of Time, followed up by Majora's Mask, using the same engine, technically the same world, but a new game, they made improvements, and the game was great in its own right. Here they used Breath of the Wild and built on that, and like you said, the nostalgia, the familiarity factor with Zelda is what will automatically elevate it. And like I said, it's not a perfect game, but there's been plenty of Game of the Years that aren't perfect games. But this year has a ton of contenders. Final Fantasy 16, what will be Spider-Man 2. Starfield is looking very strong, despite it being a Bethesda IP, and we know how Bethesda games tend to launch. But when you're looking at what Zelda has done and the zeitgeist built around it and what's happening in the gaming world, I just think of like Elden Ring from the year prior. It's everything that encapsulates gaming is Zelda right now, and the game just speaks to everything. Final Fantasy is turning to be a strong contender with high Metacritic scores, and I feel like unless the other games do something completely new and amazing, they're going to have a hard time matching up to what Zelda does. And with that, I just want to say in the chat, Saber Rider 13, T Diddy from the Loop Bros is in the house, and he says Starfield will fail if it has a day one update or it has to be constantly patched. So take that into consideration.
Constantly patch, I can agree with. And I definitely think that a day one patch is not going to look good. But how many games these days come out with a day one patch? I don't think a day one patch will kill it. But depending on like people having download the game and then download a patch, I mean, yeah, that's going to kill part of their playtime. But I think that people will persevere past a day one patch because we're just so used to them at this point that they'll still, really enjoy the game if it is a good game. And
Final
people
Fantasy
will,
16. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Final Fantasy 16 had a 500 megabyte day one patch.
And people will still love Final Fantasy 16. Now, granted, Final Fantasy probably has more leeway to work with than Starfield, but I still think if Starfield is good, people will look past a day one patch. Unless there's a patch every single day.
Yeah, well, that depends on if the game comes out super broken. Listen, if it comes out with some things that need to be patched and they go, oh, we didn't expect that, okay. But if it comes out in Redfall territory or where something happens and it needs to be patched every other week, what was it? A couple months ago, a game called Wild Hearts came out. And for those of you unfamiliar, it's THQ's answer to Monster Hunter. And it's a really neat game, but the performance across all systems was horrendous. And now, even after so many patches, it's still not up to standards, at least on PC. It's a little more stable on the consoles. But it's just, if your game has to constantly patched, it doesn't speak well to you being that Game of the Year contender. And T. Diddy, yes, published by EA, developed by THQ.
Yeah. So I think Zelda's already won Game of the Year, but we'll see. I'm sure it'll be, a real, it'll be a good thoroughbred race, especially if Starfield, people were wowed by the showcase that Microsoft did. So I'm sure that, Spider-Man, Starfield, Final Fantasy 16, I mean, they'll all be nominees in there and they'll all get heavy consideration. I just don't know how you beat Link and Zelda and Ganondorf. Really, it's going to be hard nut to crack. I'll say that much. And Link and Zelda, these are characters that we have loved from video games for so long. A character that we love more so from the movie landscape than from video games is indeed coming to video games. That being our friend Indiana Jones. This article comes from Game Informer, written by Wesley LeBlanc. Headline reads, Bethesda's Indiana Jones game will be exclusive to Xbox and PC. Quote, Bethesda's Indiana Jones game, which is currently being developed by Wolfenstein developer Machine Games, will be exclusive to Xbox. This news comes from an ongoing court trial between the Federal Trade Commission and Xbox happening today, which is where Bethesda's head of publishing Pete Hines revealed the game will be console exclusive on PC, as reported by IGN. Like Xbox's other first-party releases, Machine Games, Indiana Jones will also come to PC. However, Hines also revealed that Disney and Bethesda parent company ZeniMax originally signed an agreement that this Indiana Jones game would be multi-platform, meaning it likely will also release on PlayStation. Hines says that after Microsoft acquired ZeniMax in 2020, the agreement with Disney was amended to transition the Indiana Jones game away from a multi-platform release and instead into one that will release exclusively on Xbox and PC. Today's court trial also revealed that Xbox head Phil Spencer told Hines and Bethesda that Bethesda should look at title exclusivity on a case-by-case basis, IGN reports. As for why Indiana Jones was transitioned to exclusive, Hines cited reducing risk and trying to get a degree of clarity. You're dealing with a licensor who is giving a ton of feedback on what you're making, is going to add a ton of time to your scheduling these agreements. You don't take as long as you want. You have a window of time in which you're going to release a game. You immediately have a clock that's ticking, Hines said, according to IGN. Which, translation, are they trying to release this game? I mean, I guess we still don't have a release date for this game, but I guess they're trying to get close enough to the Dial of Destiny, which is the new Indiana Jones game, to kind of feed off the fumes of whatever people get from the Dial of Destiny. Because, I mean, obviously after Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the Indiana Jones franchise has largely been on the back burner. We haven't seen a lot of new content from it. It's not like Star Wars where everywhere you turn there's more Star Wars or there's more Indiana Jones. That just hasn't been the case. So I guess maybe in translation they want to focus on one SKU or working on the PC SKU and the Xbox SKU so they can get it out in close proximity or as close to proximity as they can to Dial of Destiny. Matt, what is your thoughts on this? Because obviously they talked about Phil Spencer saying case-by-case basis, but this seems like a game that would be better off, since you're paying huge licensing fees on more consoles than others. It'd be better to be multi-platform and also on PlayStation to recoup your money.
I guess my question is this a calculated risk that if we're not talking about what Xbox thinks they can do if and when they get the Activision deal. Being Bethesda ZeniMax, they have the license, they can do with it what they want. I think the story recently came out that, Starfield wasn't going to come. I think Phil Spencer said Starfield wasn't going to come to Xbox until they bought Bethesda. So when they turn around and say something like Indiana Jones is going to be exclusive, that does come with it some benefits. As they said, it gives them more focus, more ability to not worry about cross-platform development, which a lot of developers have difficulty with. But yeah, to your point, Indiana Jones isn't a cheap IP. It's up there with some of the greatest movies of all time, and to have it, you want to make your money back on it. And if they're going to put this thing out there on Game Pass, that's even more of an issue that people won't necessarily be buying a game. So it better have one hell of a story. And unfortunately, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull did not do well. And there's potential that Dial of Destiny isn't going to do well. And if they're trying to release a game on a timeline in association with the movie to drive up sales, that's not going to do well.
You got a week.
Yeah, it's hey, here's your date. Go do that. Sure, okay. It'll be a piece of crap, but I mean, we'll get it out if that's what you want, boss. I just have an issue with forced dates. If a game is going to naturally release and be good, it can't be put up against forced timelines. Even look at a game like Redfall that didn't necessarily have forced timelines, but still came out and was not great. So doing that with a storied IP, that makes me concerned about the well-being of the franchise in general. Saber Rider 13 in chat says that, Indiana Jones has been dead and buried since the Last Crusade. He loved Indiana Jones. It was the theme of his life as a kid. And he goes on to say, it will lose more money than you know what to say. It's going to be a great write-off for Disney. And the first 40 minutes are going to be awesome because it's all member berries, which they're using that DH technology. Then after that, not so much. So that's his prediction.
All right, so I do want to get Saber's opinion since Saber has a lot to say about this. I want to hear what you think. So after seeing Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because you didn't mention, obviously in real time, Temple of Doom was the last Indiana Jones movie release of the first three. Now it's not the last as far as the movie timeline. It falls. I think it's the first one inside the movie timeline, isn't it?
What's that?
Temple of Doom. Last released by date, but I think in the timeline, it's not like the final movie in the Indiana Jones chronology, right?
Well, Temple of Doom was the second release.
Are you sure? I thought it was last.
No, Raiders was first.
Okay.
Last Crusade was the third one.
Okay, so Saber would be including. For some reason, I've always thought the Temple of Doom was last as far as time. Calendar date was released, year. But I guess no, Saber is now including that. Okay, within saying that the series died. Because that was my question, is that hasn't Indiana Jones been dead for a long time? Like, we still appreciate the first three movies. But anything after that, like, yes, we have a love for Uncharted, but that's not Indiana Jones. Isn't the franchise essentially dead at this point, Yield? I mean, unless Dial of Destiny is really, really good. Do you...
Yeah, I mean... Kingdom of the Crystal Skull failed on, well, in my opinion, every front. And then, so we're trying to do one more, last hurrah. I've heard some things from some early reviews that it's not looking the best. I'll watch it for my opinion. But I'm hoping for the best, expecting the worst.
And then as far as your comments yield on this story, with it going exclusive to Xbox and Microsoft and them.
I'm not surprised in a sense, because, I mean, why wouldn't Xbox want that little gem as your, as an exclusive? I'm more surprised that Disney was like, okay, sure, let's redo the deal so you can be exclusive only. You would think, like, Matt was saying in the beginning, that you would want as much revenue as you can get. So when you make it an exclusive, you now pigeonhole yourself. And on top of that, if you give it away free on Game Pass, you're getting less revenue. I was more shocked about Disney redoing the deal than I was, Microsoft going, hey, we're going to make this exclusive.
Doesn't that just tell us that Microsoft threw more money at them?
That's what I would think, that they threw in the money that they might lose.
Matt, anything else you want to add to the story, sir?
Not myself, but Saber does say that Raider is the first, and that if the series would have been handed off to Brendan Fraser after the first Mummy, it would have lived on. Fraser could have played Indy's son. And then he finalizes, Microsoft has had to deal with Disney for years. Never forget, they've been working hand in hand for a very long time.
I'm glad there's some love for the Mummy out there, because the first Mummy movie was really good. I love the first Mummy movie, and even the second one. Third one, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, my gosh. That's where it fell off the cliff right there.
Yeah, well, it didn't have Rachel Weisz, so...
that's not the only reason, sir. Let's not act like that's the only reason. But
only reason for me.
I've been called out for I've been called out for my Nicolas Cage comments recently, but I will not let anybody. I will die on that hill. I will not let anybody defend Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. And yes, I've seen that movie. No,
I don't think I've seen that movie. I think I stopped with the second one.
Yeah, you don't have to. Have you seen the bumper sticker that says I'd rather be watching the whatever year it came out, such and such classic movie I'd rather be watching this movie starring Brendan Fraser, The Mummy. It's a classic, something like that. It's a bumper sticker out there.
I need to find that bumper sticker, because I want that for my car. But honestly, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor was so bad, I don't think Lance Reddick could have even saved it. Speaking of our man Lance Reddick, this article comes from IGN.com, written by Ryan Dinsdale. Horizon Forbidden West players discover tribute to Lance Reddick. Lance Reddick obviously passed away in March of this year. Quote, Horizon Forbidden West players have discovered an in-game tribute to late Lance Reddick, who played Silence in the series and passed away in March. As reported by Push Square, Reddit user SFALJ, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name very well, but I'll give you the proper credit. Just do my best. Shared a screenshot of a memorial that players can visit in Burning Shores expansion for Horizon Forbidden West. As seen in the image above, the memorial has Reddick's name floating in lights on a cliff overlooking the Hollywood sign. It can be found on the first island players visit in the northeast corner. It's unclear whether the tribute was added to Horizon Forbidden West, with many players adamant it wasn't there when they first played through the expansion. It was only noticed recently. It's possible Guerrilla Games added it in the 1.26 update that was released on June 20th. Reddick, who was also known for his roles in John Wick, Destiny, The Wire, and more, passed away suddenly from natural causes on March 17th. So you have to imagine that this was added. I mean, even if it wasn't added in a patch, if it was there all along, this was a nice way for Guerrilla Games to pay tribute to Lance Reddick, who they've admitted, or at least that I've seen most recently, where they haven't even thought about how the series is going to go on without him. They're just kind of at this point, trying to show respect to the family and love to the family, and just kind of remember Lance Reddick, as there was an outpouring of support and love for Lance, after his passing. They're just trying to, think of the family and support them as best they can, and just kind of support, all the people who love Lance Reddick as best they can. So, we'll see how they continue forward with Silence, but a nice little tribute. Not a huge news story, but definitely something we want to cover. Matt, your comments on this, sir?
I think to your point, listen, the second the news happened, everybody's first thought was, oh, what does this mean? What does this mean for the series?
Which is, I mean, I hate to say this, but it made me feel terrible, because it's like this man just lost his life, and his family just lost someone they love, and the friends too. And I'm like, how are they going to continue on with Silence?
Yeah, but I hear what you're saying, but to a different mindset, I think that actually honors his skills and abilities as an actor. Because listen, there's a reason that they do what they do. They entertain us. They bring us joy. They bring us sadness. They make us feel things. And for us to associate Horizon Forbidden West or the Horizon series and Silence in the same sentence, you're up there saying, here's Ashley Birch as Aloy, and then Lance Reddick as Silence. That is all one factor. They all add up to the series. And for us to go, man, how are they going to continue without him? That speaks to his level of gravitas and what he brought to the series. Like, we can't fathom this series existing without him. So I think that does, in a way, if you're asking me in a selfish way, like, oh, what are they going to do now? I think that's one thing. But I think in the way that you and I would tend to ask it and yield, I think it means a lot to say, listen, he was great. He made part of this game. And for them to continue on, I don't envy their position. That's a rough call to make. And for everybody, if there were people saying, oh man, they should have had this in the game when the DLC dropped, I think that would have been very irresponsible of the developers to just turn around and make a thing right as they're trying to launch the DLC. That could derail a lot of stuff. I think it's very nice and respectful that they did it after the fact, gave people time to mourn, and then put up something that was very nice to memorialize the guy. And I'm for one to be happy that the gaming community did this.
And Yield, sir, your thoughts on this? You were the one who put together the agenda, so you thought this story was particularly noteworthy.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool how they added it in. You know, a nice little nod to somebody who was one of the cornerstones of the franchise. You know, and they didn't announce it. You know, it was just something that they put in the game. If you find it, cool. If not, it's there. So.
And like, see, I got super excited when I found the Chinese theater on one of the islands in the Burning Shores. You know, I mean, because it's not hard to see the Hollywood sign. It's, you know, not pasted all over the place, but there's a very important key mission where the Hollywood sign is front center. But finding, you know, the Chinese theater was like a moment for me, like, oh, that's so cool. And then there's this. Like, imagine being the first person to stumble on this, and just, I would shit a brick house. I'd be, that's so fucking cool. Because let's be real, they didn't have to do this. Like, they put out there, they could have put something on Twitter. They could have, you know, everybody could have paid tribute to him in their own way. But this is a special way that the team at Guerrilla could pay tribute to him. So I see it, even though it's something small, like, that lives on forever in this game. And I think that's just something really cool that they did for Lance and his family and his friends. And just, you know, it just shows you how much they appreciate the people that they work with. So if you're somebody who has, you know, worked, you know, Ashley Birch or whoever who's worked as part of the team, you got to appreciate that. So I just love seeing this kind of stuff. Appreciation for people and just kind of memorializing him in a way that will always live forever. So that is really cool.
Saber's putting his prediction in the chat that they're going to have a pre-recorded voice of Lance telling Aloy to go somewhere, and when you get there, suddenly an AI will start taking over the parts that Lance would have had in the next games.
Yeah, I can't argue against that. I think the Saber's probably right about that. If anyone watched the Power Ranger special Once and Always, they had voice work for Tommy, Jason, and Kimberly. It was basically archival audio that they had recorded previously. So even though the actors did not take part in the Once and Always, you know, filming, they had that archive footage where they could hear them say, like, you know, Tyrannosaurus or Dragonzord or, you know, Pterodactyl. So you hear their voices, but they're just still not part of the special. So, I mean, obviously they're going to have to do much more work with Horizon to get Silence in there and through it. But, you know, that's one of the ways that they can get around actors and people not being part of the production. So, but no, I think that's definitely a good call by Saber. It's probably what they'll do. So, all right. And one more story before we get to our community questions and our topic of the week. And look, we don't talk about the whole Activision Microsoft merger, on this show really at all. But this is one thing that I think that, and I agree with you, that this is very important. So I think we should definitely talk about this. It comes from IGN.com and is written by Ryan Dinsdale. The headline reads, Sony won't share PS6 plans with Activision if Microsoft deal goes through. I just shake my head at reading that. Quote, Sony has said it won't share plans for PlayStation 6 with Activision Blizzard if Microsoft's $68.7 billion acquisition of the company goes through. As reported by Eurogamer, PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan told the FTC, which is currently battling against Microsoft deal in court, that it couldn't give an immensely sensitive information about the next console to a company owned by Xbox. Sony simply could not run the risk of a company that was owned by a direct competitor having access to that information, Ryan said, raising concerns its game development process would be interrupted as it could no longer share confidential details about its next console. While Sony wouldn't publicly announce the PlayStation 6 until around a year or so before its launch, it has discussions and shared hardware with developers ahead of time so they can prepare games for the new system. This allows for the likes of Call of Duty to appear as a launch title, though Sony is suggesting here that Microsoft deal going through could prevent this for its next console. It would also allow, Ryan said, for the likes of Call of Duty to be optimized for the Xbox during this additional stint of development time. Ryan's comments highlight an issue with the Activision Blizzard deal not previously discussed, perhaps one not satisfied by Microsoft offering PlayStation a 10-year deal to ensure it retains Call of Duty. Microsoft will presumably have to deal with the same issue when the new console generation comes along, of course, as Sony owns the likes of San Diego Studio and Bungie, who developed the MLB The Show and Destiny franchises, respectively, both of which are multi-platform. And it's honestly not a wrinkle to this entire story that I have thought about, because, at first you read the headline and you've seen all of Sony's crying that they've done and, basically posting like, oh, hey, we can't lose Call of Duty because, this will have such a huge impact upon the industry. But, Sony has oftentimes, especially Jim Ryan being the head of the games division, come off like crybabies. But this new wrinkle where he says we can't give sensitive technology to somebody else owned by Microsoft, Matt, do you think there's anything to that? Or is this just a convenient excuse?
I'll be the first one out there to call him Crying Ryan. And you think, oh, this is just sour grapes. But when you start thinking about the technicality and the legality and what could happen, I mean, listen, you can make somebody sign NDAs all you want, but it just takes one person leaking information, and now Xbox has a solid in as to way to one up whatever development Sony's trying to come up with. So I see both sides of the argument. Under no obligation, if Xbox ends up buying Activision Blizzard and they own it and whatever agreement they have, Sony's under no obligation to accept the game. They could turn around and go, no, we don't want your game on our system. And more so, okay, we'll accept your game in our system. Start on this start date, because as you know, Call of Duty is a yearly release, and at the second Sony starts developing a PS6, generally speaking, in the past, as a third-party developer, you work with your third-party contacts to say, here's what we're developing, here's the system. That way you can get your yearly release on the game. But here, if Microsoft ends up buying Activision, Sony is essentially saying, we can't trust that Activision would keep this information confidential because it actually becomes a conflict of interest. Activision would be in a weird position having knowledge of confidential technology. And it's actually a very interesting legal take on this entire thing that, you're right, Alex, I don't think many people have thought of already.
Yeah, because at first I was like, oh man, I'm so embarrassed for Sony. I'm shaking my head. And then I read the article and it's like, oh yeah, I guess there are people out there much smarter than I am. And I mean, I guess, Jim Ryan, they have to protect their IP and they've got to look out for something like this. I think one of the concerns they raised, or one in the article they talked about, how Bungie is now owned by now owned by Sony, and Microsoft, to keep it multi-platform, will have to give some of their information to Sony or a Sony-owned studio. And that's gonna, since Sony just bought them last year, this is going to be, their next game, which is going to be Marathon. That is going to be the first time that, Microsoft has to hand that off to a Sony-owned Bungie. But the show, that it's been out multi-platform before, correct? This is, 23 multi-platform. I think that, yeah, I mean, the release date, 2023, March 24th, MLB The Show was on an Xbox console. So, it was on the Switch and, oh, come on, I'm trying to look for this. It said Xbox One and also, well, regardless, it was on Xbox consoles as well. So Microsoft would have had to hand off their technology to San Diego studio.
So, but there's one thing I want to jump in there with, Alex, and it's very important because this argument isn't about their current tech. It's about the PlayStation 6. And to the point of, I don't want to give my competitors an edge of what we're developing, because then they can turn around and use that to improve their product or one up that studio. And I think that's the important differentiating factor, because here, the show, we're on systems that are already out in the wild, already out in the hands of consumers. You can't really make improvements to the other because you already know what's out there. You know what the other system can do. But when you're talking prototypes and you're talking development kits, you can't give your competitor any insight as to what you're doing.
I mean, that's true, but also we got to look at what Microsoft is willing to do to get this deal to go through, because at one point they were considering dropping out of the EU, correct? Like, was it just the UK? I think it was just the UK, actually.
Just the UK. EU approved it.
Where they were going to drop out of the UK, the entire market, and not sell stuff there just to be able to get the deal to go through. So if this can't come to PlayStation, I mean, granted, they would still make, I mean, that would push, that would push people from at least some people from a PlayStation console to an Xbox, I would think, or PC. But we like I said, they're considering dropping out of a market to get this to go through, but are they willing to drop multi-platform status on the PlayStation to get this to go through? Because, well, I mean, they're willing to have Indiana Jones be exclusive to their console on home console, so you would assume they would do the same to Call of Duty. Like, this is not gonna, I don't think this is really a stone in the way of Microsoft. I think Microsoft would still have the deal go through. It's more so of Sony telling the Trade Commission, like, hey, I think they're trying to basically not scare Microsoft off from the deal, but scare the FTC into arguing against the deal.
Well, I think in that case, Microsoft is put in a win-win position, because they could then turn around and go, look, we're trying to make this deal in good faith and make the game available on other consoles. But Sony's not willing to give us that detail, and understandably. But hey, we're the good guys in this now. We want to work with them. They don't want to work with us.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. In all of this, Sony has been trying to position Microsoft as the villain because they don't trust Microsoft, and Microsoft has been positioning Sony as the villain by, trying to stifle this purchase. Meanwhile, Nintendo not saying a whole hell of a lot of anything because they're just doing whatever they're doing. They're like, hey, go buy Tears of the Kingdom. But Yield, we haven't heard from you yet. Your thoughts on this story, and do you think Sony has a legitimate concern when it comes to this?
Well, I would say so. Like Matt was saying, you don't want to give out what you're planning for your next console to a competitor where, all it takes, like he said, all it takes is one guy to go, oops, I posted this on social media. And then now it's out there, or you slide something under the table after a meeting, and they know what's going on. So I'm not surprised. There was another article I didn't put in with that Phil Spencer was pointing the finger at Sony for saying that the reason that they didn't have Minecraft on the 5 was because, again, Sony wouldn't give them dev kits so that they could put it on the 5. And I see that and I'm like, but I mean, that makes sense. If, let's say, Spider-Man was multi-console, would Xbox go to Insomniac and go, here you go. Here's the Series S, Sony company. Open it up. Have fun. No. So.
Well, again, I think to that point, I think Matt brought up a good point where we're talking about the generation that hasn't been put out yet, the PS6, which is still in development, whereas Microsoft might hand over the Series S or the X because it's already out there. Sony, honestly, Sony could have bought a Series X or S at the store, taken it back, and had someone, take it apart and see what's on the inside.
Which I fully expect every company does anyway.
But again, I also think that, it's a good point from Matt that would Microsoft give them the Xbox Double X or whatever is next? Would they give them that, the 720 or whatever, which hasn't been released, to develop a Spider-Man 2 on? I just got a message from JT saying it's not on the Series X. What? JT, what he says it's not on the Series X. Microsoft is backward compatible via Xbox One, or Minecraft is compatible via JT. I know you're listening to the show, my man. Is JT in the chat?
Yeah, he's in. He said Minecraft isn't natively on the Xbox Series X either. It's backwards compatible via the Xbox One. So he's bringing up the fact that there was no Series X version of Minecraft.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, that's
bad.
No, I mean, Yil, do you think that they, and thank you for the clarification, JT. So do you think Microsoft would hand brand new tech, unforeseen tech to Sony, a Sony studio to, because like you can sign an NDA, but like
to
really
make their game or make a game multi-console? I don't believe so. I don't see Microsoft going, hey, here's our new console, have fun.
But I mean, like you can sign an NDA, like Matt said, but what if someone has the specs written down on paper and a Sony executive is in the studio and like the paper is just sitting on someone's desk and the Sony executive just comes by and sees the paper or something? I don't know.
Just happens to walk by and see it.
That doesn't, require anyone, or you have the specs on a computer screen or something. That doesn't require anyone telling anyone, hey, these are the specs. So
it's about as suspicious as an oops as when Casey Jones activated the dumpster after Shredder fell in.
Yeah. Yeah, and sorry, I'm getting great reference there, man. I'm just trying to parse here what JT's saying. He says that Microsoft Dev Kit is the PC Dev Kit. So, yeah, we'll have to take JT's word on that because I looked to Matt because Matt knows more about PC than I do, and Matt's like, I don't know. All right, anything we want to add about this topic, gentlemen, before we get into Nicolas Cage Mania 6000?
I think we tortured Rick enough with this talk.
Wait, was Rick again?
No,
totally
Rick hates absolutely anything to discuss about the merger. I guess even this would count. So sorry, Rick.
All right. Well, let me see here. Okay, so we got a couple topics started by V. 4 days ago, Veronica asked in the Trophy Wars Facebook group, "What is the best Nicolas Cage movie?" And we got a lot of comments for this. So apparently, I mean, we've talked a lot about Nicolas Cage on recent episodes, but Nicolas Cage is a popular topic here. My response was, because I wax and wane between The Rock and Con Air, but my response was a gif of Nicolas Cage winking from Con Air. Ashley says, "Weird, you told me that Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance was your favorite movie," and then I shared a gif of a man throwing a computer chair in a pool. And I said, at least the first Ghost Rider had a really good trailer. And that's honestly what disappointed me so much about the first Ghost Rider is the trailer sold me so much and it looks so cool. And then we got the movie. Mark Frazier says Face Off. Joseph C says Gone in 60 Seconds. Michael Reeby said The Family Man. Riley says Con Air. Robert Workman says Face Off. Daryl says Con Air / Face Off. I can't decide. Nitro says definitely Gone in 60 Seconds. A close second would be National Treasure. Evans says Matchstick Men, great twist and fantastic performances from Cage and Sam Rockwell. Rochelle says Raising Arizona, which is a movie I've seen, but I completely forgot about. That's a great pick. Homer says, fine, I'll say it because everyone else is afraid to. Wicker Man, which has to be a joke. Has to be, right, Yield?
I don't know. I've never seen Wicker Man, so.
Oh. I'm fairly certain it's just because of the line about the bees.
Oh, yeah, the bees. Yeah, that's classic Nicolas Cage. Donnie Love seeing Donnie in the comments. Says Matchstick Men. Joe S says National Treasure is my favorite due to the Indiana Jones vibes, but I also really like Con Air, Face Off, Knowing, and Raising Arizona. Kalai says Raising Arizona. Lots of love for Raising Arizona here. Curtis says my top 3 are Con Air, Face Off, and National Treasure. Haven't seen Renfield yet, but going to check it out since it's on Peacock. We have access to Peacock, so I'll probably watch that too. V says National Treasure, 100%. Oh, Matt. Everyone can like what they like. Let's see. Yield says Con Air. Curtis again says spoiler. While it's funny as hell, low-key Nick Cage is Superman. Probably should have said why. What's that a spoiler for? But I guess whatever that's a spoiler for. I haven't seen that movie, but I can totally guess what movie it's for. Obviously DC movie. So sorry if I ruined anything for anybody. Jeremy Englehart says Mandy is definitely near the top of the list for me. Color Out of Space is another great flick. Classic batshit crazy Cage. Steven says Con Air probably. Garrett says why hasn't anyone mentioned The Rock? For me, it's that Con Air or Face Off. Yield says in response to that I would have mentioned The Rock, but to me I'm watching The Rock for Sean Connery. George, also known as Me See Goats a Lot, says I decided I don't care what the reviews and whatnot say. It's National Treasure for sure. Also shout out to something that probably won't get a mention, but I quite like it next as well. Nitro says, thank you, a true individual with taste. Yeah, I'll see you in hell, Nitro. Stuart Bannerman says, my favorite is Face Off. And finally, Justin Cooper says Pig. And anything anybody wants to add to that topic of conversation? Matt, you didn't say anything. We had Veronica say her favorite, but you didn't join in on the chat there.
Yeah, something, my problem is, you don't like Nicolas Cage. No. I like Nicolas Cage. I am not out here to throw shade at the man. He's obviously done something very right, and he's in a much different place in his life than I am. So I'm not about to throw shade. For me, and I've thought very long on this subject, and for me, it's The Rock, because a mix of him and Sean Connery to me is just awesome, and then Ed Harris thrown in for good measure makes the movie that great, because otherwise it would have been Con Air, but I really hate his accent in Con Air, and I can't stand it for as long as it needs to. And no amount of Steve Buscemi or why am I drawing a blank on his name?
John
Malkovich can save me from Nicolas Cage's bad Southern accent.
I get it. I admit that it's not great, but also the surrounding cast to that I think makes up for it. Like, honestly, that's what makes Con Air so good. It's not necessarily just Nicolas Cage, it's the concept. And Nicolas Cage pulls it off fine, but the supporting cast is really what makes Con Air as great as it is. Because the best character in that movie is Cyrus the Virus, John Malkovich. It's not Nicolas Cage. So while I think that Nick Cage carries his into the bargain pretty well, there are other characters in that movie that are more important, I think, to that story. Because I don't think anyone else but John Malkovich could have played Cyrus the Virus. I do think you could have found somebody besides Nick Cage to play that role.
And that's why for me it's The Rock, because I buy Nick Cage being a egghead more than a chiseled military man.
Fair enough. The other topics of conversation we have from V, just posting to get questions for the crew. The first one comes from JT. He asked, what do you guys think about Phil Spencer riddling the FTC with a shit ton of bullets day 2 of this hearing, also showing evidence that Jim Ryan knows that COD will still be on, COD being Call of Duty, will still be on PlayStation after. They just wanted to stop the deal because they wanted to stop the deal. So I haven't kept up with the hearings really, just a little bit here and there. But Matt, did you see any more about the hearings than I have?
Yeah, basically it was Phil Spencer under oath in the hearing with the FTC saying, and I kind of really hate the angle they're taking, but it's, we should be allowed to buy because look at us, we're third place in the console wars, and we should be allowed to do this because it'll give us parity amongst the groups. And that's such a weak argument, and I am not happy with the way Microsoft and Phil Spencer are trying to make this out to be. I'm beyond the point now. At first, I wanted the merger to go through. Now I'm just like, I don't want to hear about it anymore. You guys are Jimmy Ryan's crying left and right. Phil Spencer now looks utterly defeated with that interview that happened last month. And now with everything else that's starting to pile on, I'm starting to get to the point where it's like, all right, guys, you need to shit or get off the pot.
I mean, yeah, this thing has been drug out longer than it should have. And honestly, at this point, like initially I was like, let it go through. Who cares? I'm still kind of that mindset. But at the same time, like I've been, and that's part of why I haven't paid attention to the hearings is I just don't care anymore. Like I don't want to hear it. So for me, I mean, Phil Spencer, honestly, they're going to take whatever angle is best to basically market the idea of them buying Activision Blizzard. Because if they can't buy Activision Blizzard, they have to pay a pretty hefty amount of money. I can't remember how much it is, but is it $3 million? If the deal doesn't go through?
I would think more than $3 million, because $3 million is it's not going to be
I guess maybe
$3 million is a drop in the bucket for them. If
I would have to think, is it $3 billion then? I'll try to look that up, but yeah, I'm so tired of hearing about this. Although, I mean, obviously, Microsoft wants this to go through. Sony doesn't want this to go through. I think that, anything within the Indiana Jones game going exclusive, I think that pretty much everything Microsoft or anything Bethesda going forward would go exclusive. If they're gonna keep that game exclusive, I don't understand why they wouldn't just keep everything else exclusive, except if they made more money off a game on the PlayStation Network than they did on Xbox. So, like if there are more people playing Call of Duty and spending more money on the PlayStation Network, then I can see them keeping that game exclusive, or excuse me, multi-platform. But anything else, would Deathloop, if Deathloop, had been developed under Microsoft Game Studios, that game probably wouldn't have been on the PlayStation at all. So aside from maybe any game that they make more money off on the PlayStation Network, they're probably going to turn it exclusive. I would think they would have to. So Yield, I'm going to look up this number that they have to pay. What do you think about kind of the approach that Matt was talking about?
Okay, I was reading something. What was the approach? I'm sorry.
He was just saying how the way their position is that, hey, we're third in the console races, we're behind Sony, okay. So we should be able to buy it just for sake of parity.
I agree with Matt. That's rather weak. I haven't been following any of the hearings. I'm with pretty much everybody else. I'm sick and tired of hearing about it. Buy them, don't buy them. I don't care at this point. If they get Call of Duty, I've been that way from the get-go. Big deal. They get Call of Duty. Who cares? It doesn't affect me. I understand that it would affect other gamers, and I would feel bad for you in that instance, but it doesn't overly affect me, so I could kind of care less. And now it's turned into it feels like, at least from the media, it's turned into a bunch of crying from both both presidents of their respective companies as to, oh, boo-hoo-hoo, if you let this go through, this is what it'll do to my company. Boo-hoo-hoo, if you don't let it go through, this is what it'll do for my company. And then the next week, they're both standing up there flexing of how awesome they are. And it's just, yeah. I do agree with Matt, though, that it's kind of a weak argument to go, you should let this pass because we're third in the race.
So I did find the number here. This comes from an article on GameSpot.com written on April 26, 2023. Quote, there is a situation where Activision Blizzard would need to hand over multiple billions of dollars. According to the official terms of the deal, Microsoft will be required to pay Activision Blizzard what is called a reverse termination fee of $3 billion if the deal doesn't get done. So, in short, JT, my thoughts are that I expect Sony and Microsoft to say whatever they have to say and present whatever they have to present as far as their cases go to get the deal either to go through or not go through. I'm just going to leave it in the hands of the FTC and stay the hell out of it until I comment on it when the deal is finally done. So
Saber did bring up something in the chat, and I want to hit on real quick because he says it doesn't make any sense for anybody to take on Activision when they're having a lot of problems, and the best thing that ever happened is they can. renegotiate this deal with all the things that are taking place right now. He said it's not about Call of Duty. The bigger picture is different IP as they would lock down, and having control of the PC world is very important to Microsoft. Now, I say there's one thing that the main reason I want this deal to go through is I'm hoping this is a way to get Bobby Kotick out of the industry. He's been nothing but poison for the last decade, even longer. And my hope was that with Microsoft buying it and doing a merger and cleaning house, that hopefully, even though he gets his golden parachute, he gets gone. He needs to be gone. And, he's just no good for the industry anymore.
Honestly, I think that I wonder if this deal doesn't go through, if Microsoft and Activision Blizzard don't try again. But I wonder if the situation could ever play out where Activision sells off studios to lessen their value, but keep certain things like King and Call of Duty and stuff like that. But they sell off certain studios to kind of lighten the load, and then Microsoft tries to buy a smaller value Activision Blizzard with still like key elements in there, like Blizzard. I don't know if that would ever take place, but this would have to fail, and they would have to try again for that to happen. And that would obviously, with them, trying to sell assets would take even longer. So I don't know if they would want to deal with that.
Well, I think the problem you run into is the arguments being made by the FTC and the UK that, the UK is concerned about the streaming, the cloud capabilities that would strengthen based off the deal, which I'm still not understanding. And then you got Sony talking about Call of Duty. So Activision's not going to get rid of their Call of Duty. That's never going to happen. And obviously cloud streaming, Microsoft's Game Pass is their bread and butter. It's what they're focused on. So that's not going to go anywhere. I respectfully disagree that I don't think any amount of load lightning is going to make this deal suddenly okay in the detractors' eyes.
Okay. Yeah, because they have talked about the cloud capabilities of Microsoft and that being something that people were concerned about. So it's just a thought I had in my head that passed through. Next question we have is from Thomas Crawford, and it's a wrestling-centric question. Do you think LA Knight will break through? Who's going to win Money in the Bank? Speed kills? What games move so fast you die? Tony Hawk is an icon. What's his best game? All right, we'll go first question. And I'll ask you, Matt, do you have any knowledge of wrestling at all? Do you pay attention whatsoever?
Not since the Attitude Era.
All right. Yield, sir, do you think LA Knight will break through?
I haven't been watching wrestling that much. I know that's kind of the buzz going around the internet, is that it's kind of his to lose, so to speak. So, I mean, from who I've seen who's kind of in it, it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, he's not actually in the Money in the Bank match. Just in general, do you think that he is eventually? Well, no, actually, he is in the Money in the Bank match.
Yes, he is in the Money in the Bank match.
Okay, all right. But overall, do you think he's going to break out? Because they had him on a losing streak, and then recently, we've heard, before WrestleMania that they were going to push him, and then he wasn't on WrestleMania, which was in Los Angeles, and people were annoyed by that. And recently, he's won some big matches, including against Rey Mysterio. So he's kind of gotten off the losing ways. But overall, do you think they're eventually going to push him? Because he does get reactions. People do cheer him when he's out there. He's over with the fans.
If the fans are pushing enough, I mean, it's quite possible.
Okay, because here's the Money in the Bank ladder match. Ricochet, LA Knight, Shinsuke Nakamura, Santos Escobar, Butch from the Brawling Brutes, Damian Priest, and Logan Paul. So Yield, out of that group, who do you think is going to win?
Well, I wouldn't mind seeing Butch or Damian Priest, because I like those two. Your big name is Shinsuke. WWE could always throw a wild card with Logan Paul. God, I hope not. I don't care if he's talented. Dude's annoying as F. But you could see someone as LA Knight getting that win because of like I said, the only big name you got in there is Shinsuke. But there are other guys who you could make an argument for, and if he were to get that win, that would be a big push for him.
So I think that initially I thought that Priest would win, but I think that with what's going on with him and Finn Balor, they may forward the division between those two by having Finn Balor cost Damian Priest the briefcase. So honestly, Yield, for the reason you said, I think Logan Paul's going to win because I think that guy is a true heat magnet. People don't like him. They don't like his personality. They don't like his brother. And I think just giving him the briefcase and having him out there brag a ton and eventually get a title shot at, either Roman or Seth Rollins, both of whom he's wrestled and had good matches with, I think it's going to be Logan Paul.
Oh, God, I hope not.
But for that reason is why exactly they.
I know, and that's why I see it as a possibility.
The next question, Thomas said, is speed kills. What games move so fast you die? I'm not, honestly, I don't really know what Thomas is asking there, to be honest. Matt, can you parse anything from
my
that?
answer to that one is Burnout.
So just like a fast racing game?
Yep. Games that just, it's faster than you can react, and therefore that causes you to die.
Oh, Wipeout. The Wipeout series on PlayStation.
Oh.
Yeah, I could never, as much as I enjoy a hover racing game, Wipeout moves way too fast.
Jet Moto back in the day.
Yeah, on the original PlayStation.
Yeah.
That and the original Twisted Metal were kind of like the reasons to own a PlayStation back in the day, like early on. And lastly, Thomas asked, Tony Hawk is an icon. What's his best game? It's got to be Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, right? 1 or 2?
I'm going to go with Tony Hawk 1 and 2 remastered.
All right. But okay, different games, yes, but still like the same thing. But they don't have the same soundtracks, do they?
Because that matters. You had to throw the soundtrack. Okay,
that was one of the most important aspects.
Tony Hawk 2. Tony Hawk 2.
Aha. Yield, sir.
I don't play skating games.
All right, and I'm not asking JT's last question because we're not talking about poop socks on this show, sir. If you want to talk about poop socks, you need to come on this show.
Just go over to Loop Bros.
Exactly. All right. So that is going to be the end of our community involvement, but we're going to move on to the topic of the week, which brings up something we've kind of touched on already, the next generation of consoles. And I'm sure this is another one of those things from the FTC hearings, but this comes from Wesley Yin-Poole at IGN.com. The headline reads, Microsoft expects the next generation of consoles to come out in 2028. In court documents, reviewed by IGN, Microsoft said the expected starting period for the next generation of consoles is 2028. This means the next Xbox and the next PlayStation 6 are set to launch 8 years after the Xbox Series X and S and PlayStation 5. The news comes from documents made public as part of the Xbox's big Activision Blizzard FTC trial, which kicked off this week. And the rest is just about the legal battle, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Here's another part that's not including the trial. Quote, a 2028 release tallies with a previous document in which Sony said it does not expect its next generation PlayStation to come out until at least 2027. In that document released in November last year, Sony claimed it expected to lose access to Call of Duty franchise in 2027. Sony then went on to state by the time it launched the next generation of its PlayStation console, it would have lost the access to Call of Duty and other Activision titles. Microsoft's filing today counters this suggestion. Let's see. Microsoft has announced a number of deals with rival video game companies in a bid to convince regulators its Activision Blizzard acquisition should be approved. For example, it signed a 10-year deal with Nintendo to bring Call of Duty to its consoles. However, it is yet to agree to a similar deal with Sony, despite drawing up the proposal. And yeah, so really that's all I want to read from this article. But are you all ready to invest in a brand new console? Now, again, this doesn't really take into account Nintendo's consoles because we probably will have the next version of the Switch 2, or whatever they want to call it, before then, since they launched the Switch before the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 came out. But as far as the Microsoft and Sony consoles, is 2028 too early, Yield?
When you think of like the 10-year cycle that they seem to be in, no, personally. I think yes. I think by at that point you're just really hitting the stride of what your console can do, and then you're trying to shift gears and push out the next one. So I think so. Yes. but considering, like, I think from the 4 to the 5, it wasn't. So I just feel that we haven't really hit the ground running with this generation of games, so to speak. It's been kind of a hit or miss years where you don't seem to have that big game coming out. And so I just feel that if you go to 28, then you've missed what the 5 can do, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, maybe part of the reason you feel that way is because so many games are released on the PS4 and the PS5 instead of being just straight up exclusive to the PS5. I mean, we had Ratchet, we had Returnal, we also had the Horizon DLC being exclusive to the PlayStation 5, but stuff like Horizon Forbidden West itself was on the 4. God of War Ragnarok was on the 4. So there has been more of an overlap as far as big exclusives go from the PS4 to the PS5 and vice versa. So maybe that's another part of the reason why you feel like that we haven't really gotten started on this console generation full speed yet.
That could be.
Matt, sir, your comments. Are you going to buy a new console? Are you ready to buy a new console within 5 years, 6 years, maybe?
I was going to say those are two very different questions, because if it's, am I going to buy a console? Yes, I'm going to buy a console. Am I ready to buy a console? I'm with Yield on this. The PS5 has 8K written on the side of the box. And we are nowhere near games being natively 8K with a frame rate that could, avoid my eyes bleeding trying to watch it. What was it? 2005 was 360 and PS3. And then it went to 2013. So there's your 8-year cycle. And then 2013 to 2020. So 7-year cycle. I think we're at a point where these cutting edge consoles need a longer than 7 to 8 year cycle to fully realize their capabilities. We were getting some drop dead gorgeous games on the PS4 in the last year of its lifespan. And only when we started playing those games on the PS5 were they fully realizing their potential. So there's arguments on both sides to say that, yeah, you need to start that process, but we're also 3 years, it'll be 3 years from the launch of the 5 in the series. And we still haven't hit that mid-cycle refresh that they tend to like to do now. And my bigger concern is with the way that these pricings have been going, the consoles have been just going up and up and up. And now, for the first time, these companies have increased the price of their consoles after launch, when in traditional past, costs have gone down. I'm of the mindset, coming from the PC world, where I used to upgrade my rig every 3 years. But now I'm in a long haul. Now I've got some serious bills to pay, and I go, okay, I can stretch that CPU out a little longer. I think the biggest thing these companies have to ask is, what is the next technology they can leverage? Because the PS4 and Xbox One consoles were great. You know what wasn't great? The hard disk drives and the long load times. The new consoles allowed them to put in solid state drives natively that allow them to leverage loading times to make gaming experience better. So my question is, what's the next technology in the next 5 years that they're going to try to leverage to improve our experience as gamers? Because upping resolutions isn't doing it anymore. Games look fantastic. And yeah, they can always look more photorealistic, as with all technology. But what is the next piece of hardware, or maybe is it software, that they're going to introduce that improves our lives as gamers? And I just don't fathom seeing anything in the next 5 years. Because if they're going to start developing it, if they say that, oh, the next console will be in 2028, they need to start planning now. They need to start figuring out what's out there now or what's going to come in the next 2 to 3 years so they can start their process of developing that new console and giving developers enough time to make good games for it.
So I think, Matt, part of the answer to your question is because it's not like back in the day when you went from the Super Nintendo to the 3D era of the Nintendo 64. I think part of the social features tying to Twitch and having the PlayStation app and all these things, like being kind of more connected with your game community and, party chat and all that, that has kind of been like a magician's wave of how to kind of distract from the fact that these consoles can do these things that other consoles couldn't do, but necessarily like the visuals have gotten better, but we're getting to the point where people can't see any better. They can't notice, discern like the quality, graphically games can't get much better to us because our eyesight just doesn't discern that. So I think that the social features have been a way to kind of add functionality without kind of highlighting the fact that we're getting to the end of the tunnel when it comes to making games look really, really good. And I did want to say, you mentioned the PlayStation 3's life cycle. I don't remember the dates you said for the 4, but for the 3, it came out in Japan in 2006 in November and was discontinued in most regions in early 2016. So it had about a 10-year life cycle on it. But now, 10 years was typically that life cycle everyone pointed to, and now it seems it's getting less and less. We're getting, when we should be getting longer console cycles, to fully stretch out the legs of the 5 and the Xbox Series X, we are getting shorter ones, it seems, as far as if these documents are, if Microsoft and it really turns out that we get new consoles at the end of 2027 or 2028. As long as my PlayStation 5 can last us that long, I will be happy to play that into 2028, 2029, and 2030. I don't necessarily need anything higher in than that. I just need you to continue to put out really good games. That's all I really need. So I'm at the point now where with these consoles that, and even if the PlayStation 5 had waited another couple years, I would have been happy playing on the PlayStation 4 still. I didn't necessarily need to upgrade, even though I do enjoy having a PlayStation 5 and I think it's a great console. But I can always go 10, 12 years on the console as long as it'll run that long. If I don't, put it through its paces and run it down to exhaustion. So, yeah, that's kind of the way I feel is 2028. I don't doubt it. And will the market support it? Probably, because the market supports brand new phones every other year, every year. People have got to have the new cutting edge technology. And there's enough people out there at launch to support it. For me personally, I could go another, 8-9 years on the PlayStation 5 that I have, as long as it lasts that long. So.
I would argue the differentiating factor there is phones objectively get worse the longer they're in existence. Consoles, I feel, get better just because the companies out there actually put improvements and better things into building out that console.
Are you saying that because the battery life goes down on phones, or is it because the specs of the phone just get worse with the functionality that comes out?
Battery life, one, which is just inherent and it's what the phones do, but also things in the phone life cycle, because there's so many versions of phones out there, so many different manufacturers, certain things get, what's the term I'm looking for?
Out of date?
Yeah, we'll go with out of date, because as new apps develop, they need faster processors. They're using more memory. And phones are that perfect world where, okay, it's not that big a deal. But it's because people put phones on payment plans all the time, a 2-year cycle, because they figure, oh, I'll just get a new phone in 2 years. What does it matter? When in actuality, not a lot of people are doing that with Xboxes or PlayStations. Now, I say that with the exception that Xbox does have their payment plan option that they put out with the Series X when it came out. So you probably have people who just recently paid off their Series X. But giving these systems long tails will allow people to feel better about their purchase. I just bought a $1,000 phone 2 years ago, and if it lasts to the end of 3 years, I'll be lucky. But these consoles need to last long. And the thing you brought up earlier about the PS3 life cycle, yeah, technically the life cycle is from release until the company discontinues. I consider, personally, my opinion, the life cycle is from when it gets released to the next system released, because 90% of your people are, I'm sorry, I'm throwing that number out. A good portion of your people are going to upgrade regardless and immediately stop using their old system. I know I did that with my PS4. I know other people do that when they upgraded their systems. So, you still have companies that release games. I mean, hell, what is it? We got this past week. McDonald's just released a Grimace game for the Game Boy, which is insane to think about in this day and age.
That sounds like some Sega fodder right there.
Nobody ever said it was going to be a good game, but they still released a game on Game Boy in this day and age.
But you say that, it reminds me, I was at a local game store the other day, and they had a version of McKids for the NES on the shelves. So if anyone wants a copy of McKids for the NES, you can go to, well, I assume they still have it. It might have sold. Cardinal Gaming in Middletown, Kentucky. But yeah, Yield, anything you want to add to the discussion before we get out of here?
No, I'm good.
All right, Matt, I kind of cut you off there. Anything you want?
No, it's fine. I not anymore for me, but Saber Rider does write in finally and says it'd be wise if they don't push so hard, because if they do, it could end up being another Sega Genesis thing where people, to say they're done for a while, they could lose money. You not want to push people who are just now getting PlayStations and Xboxes, even though it's been out for 3 years. He goes on to say he meant to say the 32X and CD, the 32X, the CD, and the Saturn. If companies move too quickly, the average gamer is going to rebel.
And the Saturn was particularly unfortunate, because I did like the Saturn, but yeah.
I liked my Saturn.
The Sega always seemed kind of ahead, moved faster than they should, especially even with the Dreamcast and the online capabilities with stuff like Phantasy Star Online. They just were kind of way too ahead of the time, and that's why they make software now instead of hardware. So, all right, y'all. Well, why don't we go ahead and give some shout-outs before we get out of here. Matt, you're the guest, sir, the honored guest, so why don't you start us off?
Thank you. Shout out to Alex Yield. You guys, thanks for having me on tonight. I really appreciate filling in for Tricky while he's out there earning that big money. Shout out to my wife, V, for running things in the background. You were doing an awesome job as the social media manager. And Tricky, Alex Yield are very lucky to have you. I'm just luckier that I get to have you every day. Shout out to JT and T Diddy for being in the chat and contributing to the overall conversation.
Also Saber.
T Diddy is Saber.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha.
Yep. And shout out to the channel3.gg community, a community of like-minded gamers who want to have a social media platform specific to our hobby and our life. So if you're interested, come on, join channel3.gg.
And be sure to check out Veronica on Twitch at Gamer Veranza. Again, so show her some love, because obviously we appreciate her help in running Proven Gamer. She didn't have to do it, but she does, and it's fantastic. So, Yield, sir, your shout out.
Shout out to Matt for coming on, filling in for Tricky. Shout out to Alex for recording tonight. Shout out for Veronica for doing all the behind the scenes and the social media stuff. Shout out to everybody who was hanging out in the Twitch chat and joining in on the show. That was awesome. Shout out to Nitro and Alex for Rocket League, and Nitro for some Zombie Armor Trilogy. And that'll do it for me for this week.
All right. And I, of course, first and foremost, want to give a shout out to our awesome community. Thank you all very much for continuing to support us. You are the fuel to our fire. And without you all, Proven Gamer and Trophy Horse do not exist. So we appreciate the communities for not only Proven Gamer, but also the Loot Bros. You all are awesome. Give a shout to Yield as well as to Tricky, who set everything up and got Matt on here to replace him. I don't know, Matt, necessarily if Tricky's earning his money, but I'm sure he's off doing something involved with New York Sanitation. Big shout outs to Veronica, like I said, for running everything in the back on Twitch and making sure we live stream tonight. Shout out to Matt for being here and just being as awesome as always. Last but not least, give a shout out to my awesome and loving girlfriend, Ashley. We went and got to see went to see the stage show version of To Kill a Mockingbird yesterday, and got to have a delicious dinner out last night at one of the local joints. Got guacamole, really good Mexican food. So I love you, honey. Thank you for an awesome Saturday. And if there's nothing else, we're going to wrap up here. I'm really glad my house didn't blow away. I'm really glad my power didn't go out, so didn't make this edit quite of a one hell of a bitch to deal with. But grateful for small victories. So thank you all for joining us on 577. We will see you all next week for 578. Thank you all very much for your continued support. And as always, happy trophy hunting.
See.